Good morning, everybody. Kevin here from Watch This with Joe and Kevin. This is not a normal recording day. It's storming outside. Joe's at home, and I am procrastinating on editing For All Mankind, which I need to do today. And so I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. So hear me out here. Joe and I have talked a lot on the channel about, like all of you probably at various points, um, kind of lamenting the laziness of Hollywood in remaking good movies in a cynical, nostalgic cash grab. We don't like remakes of good movies. I don't think there's a person alive who really enjoyed Gus Van Sant's remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Um, and so we did say on our channel a lot, which we've mentioned, it is okay to remake movies, I think, that are bad movies, right? To take a movie that didn't work the first time, that had the bones of a good movie, and remake it into something better. And it's been done. Two examples we like to use include Ocean's 11, right? The Steven Soderbergh one, the George Clooney remake of the original Rat Pack film, which I think was a huge improvement over the original. And when the Coen brothers remade True Grit, their adaptation was a lot more, as I understand it, I haven't read it, more close to the novel, and therefore significantly better than the original John Wayne movie. And I tend to agree, having seen both of them. Um, I have. I was trying to think if I'd ever seen a John Wayne movie the other day. I guess I have. I have seen the original True Grit. But I do want to say I'm not going to discuss any franchises here. The franchises are completely different animals that play by different rules. Franchises get recast, rebooted, and redone all the time. That's kind of the nature of them, right? We're about to get our third iteration of the Fantastic Four, and I don't think anybody's upset about faith to the to the originals. And James Bond is hopefully going to be recast sometime in the near future, and no one's upset that we're going to get yet another Bond. I'm personally hoping it's Idris Elba, but that's just me. So franchises, different animals. I'm just looking at standalone films here. Some of these are probably movies you've never heard of because I'm ancient, and some of them you might say, "Hey, wait a minute, I really, really like that movie," and I'm not really disagreeing with you. I think the potential's there, and they were really close. There were just a few things that could have shifted these into being better movies, which is why I would like to see them remade immediately and by more capable people. Usually, it's a problem with the direction or with the screenplay, and a lot of that's probably going to have to do with producer interference. And I'm also not considering movies that are so beloved, even if there's some flaws to them, that really have charm that is undeniable, that really should be messed with. Think something like The Last Starfighter, right? Don't remake The Last Starfighter. I know it's not a perfect movie, but it's a beloved, really charming classic film. All right, so I'm going to go and jump into my list here. Please do me a favor in the comments and let me know what you think. What if I'm wrong, or if there are movies that I've omitted, because there definitely are. All right, number five on my list. I'm going in order one through five. Number five is Runaway, the 1984 sci-fi film written and directed by Michael Crichton, starring Tom Selleck and Cynthia Rhodes. This movie, which I really did like as a kid, um, when I saw it on television, has a 46% current score on Rotten Tomatoes. Even as a kid, I thought some of the technology didn't really work for me, and it's easy to pick on an older movie for the technology not being up to par, right? But this had a really cool premise. In the future, robots, they are everywhere. Sometimes they malfunction. Sometimes people get hurt when they malfunction, and there's certain segments of the police force that's specifically their job is to investigate um, crimes of robots gone wrong. And Tom Selleck is one of these policemen, and in his investigations on these certain cases, they find that maybe these weren't accidents. The premise is really cool. I feel like Michael Crichton bit off more than he could chew on this one. Some of the technology stuff, like the perspective of person tracking bullets, smart bullets and stuff, the robotic acid spiders, while cool in concept, just weren't executed well. And the story kind of devolves into a kind of an action heavy chase scene movie and kind of abandons its really cool concept early on. I kind of think Michael Crichton would have been better off turning the script over to a really capable director for this. It would have helped. I think in 2024 we could make this movie much cooler and stay more focused on the investigative aspects of it. iRobot did this a little bit, but I think the concept of this is even cooler than what the Will Smith iRobot movie came up with. Certainly in execution, with the potential of it anyway. I would like to see Runaway from 1984 remade again. My number four movie is Needful Things, the adaptation of the Stephen King movie from 1993, starring Max Van Sydow, Ed Harris, and a very, very committed J.T. Walsh. Bless him. This movie had a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, you could probably we could talk for hours, right, about bad adaptations of good literary material onto film. I'm just picking one. As I was a kid growing up, I was a huge Stephen King fan in terms of his books. I saw this movie years after it was made on I don't know, DVD or VHS, and was incredibly disappointed. The potential of the script, it should probably be done more as a mini series, I would think, than a standalone film. It's a very complex script in terms of like all the people in the town. Uh, in this one, you had a good cast. The screenplay adaptation was absolutely terrible, and that's why this didn't work at all. The way they tried to collapse this into a much shorter film did not work. The adaptation is just bad. I think a more capable screenwriter with in the hands of a good director, this could actually be a really really cool movie. God, I could talk all day just about bad Stephen King adaptations, right? That's most of them until Frank Darabont comes along. All right, my number three film, Natural Born Killers from 1994, starring Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis and a whole lot of other people, directed by Oliver Stone. It has a 51% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is kind of halvesies. I know a lot of people really like this movie. I am not one of them. I saw it once. I know it's trying to be satirical about the the consumerism of violence and how much the media plays into how we feel about violence and how commercial it's become. Certainly at the time, I think this movie is incredibly mean spirited and depraved, way too depraved to be satirical. So much so, and I'm not trying to be prudish, but I think so much so that it kind of buries the satire of it, right? I just think it kind of revels in being a really ugly and mean spirited movie. I don't enjoy watching sexual violence in any way. And I think that so much of this was so over the top, and it just didn't work as a movie for me. I thought that the sitcom thing with Rodney Dangerfield and Juliette Lewis was so distracting as to like you couldn't escape the fact that you were sitting in a theater watching a movie. I watched it at home. I didn't see it in the theater. I was too young, but I don't think this movie worked at all. Um, Quentin Tarantino, who wrote the original screenplay, famously can't stand this movie, and I think he says he has never gotten all the way through it. So for me, I would love to see this remade much more faithfully to Tarantino's original script. I don't know what that script is, but I just know that I agree with Quentin on the level of schlock that this movie is, and it was trying to satirize exploitation while being incredibly exploitative at the same time. I hate it. I hate it a lot. Um, I know that's I have plenty of friends who love it, but I don't agree. I'd like to see this done better. Now, my top two films are movies that I that fall in the category of movies that we all have. Are movies that we loved when we were kids, right? And then you see them again later as an adult, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this actually isn't that good. I had terrible taste. I was a child. For me, there are two movies that played on television a lot when I was a kid, so I saw them on TV when I was very little and loved them. And now that you go back and watch them now, and they're not great. Um, but again, the potential is really there. Number two on my list is The Ice Pirates, 1984, starring Robert Urich and Mary Crosby, and a very, very gay Michael D. Roberts. This movie has a 17% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and I was shocked when I saw that because, again, I had visions in my head of a really cool movie, and then you go back and watch it, and it's like, oh, wait, no, this is actually terrible. The premise is really cool. I feel like, again, with some of the sci-fi elements, I feel like kind of the same thing with Runaway. They just bit off more than they could chew as far as what they were able to execute at the time in terms of the visual effects. I would like to see it redone. It's very coarse, which I thought was hilarious as a child, but I think could be tamed down just a little bit. It's an incredibly coarse, vulgar movie. Can't believe I was allowed to watch it as a child, actually. Fortunately, some of the grosser jokes went way over my head. Um, I just thought it was a lot of fun. It's kind of a Star Wars weird, how everybody tried to make Star Wars after Star Wars, and I feel like this kind of came into that. What if the whole movie was just about a Han Solo type character and his crew in a very, very wacky world? the humor doesn't really land as much as it did, but I think the concept of people throughout the galaxy battling for water it would be kind of prescient. I think if it was made today, I think it could be a lot of fun. I think there are elements of that we see in like Mad Max movies about battling over the scarcity of resources that I think is something you can do interesting things with. So I would like to see a movie, beloved to me from my childhood, that just didn't really work, remade, The Ice Pirates. And my number one movie, which you may have never heard of, that I also loved watching on television as a small child and came to find out disappointingly later that it was just a bad movie, is 1983's Krull, directed by Peter Yates, starring a lot of people you don't know. But I will give a shout out to a very lovely performance from a very committed David Batley and Alan Armstrong, who we've seen in lots of things. The 80s, there was a whole lot of sword and sandal movies. Conan the Barbarian is one. They were very popular because they were cheap to make. I feel like this one wasn't. This was a really ambitious one because there are a lot of sci-fi elements and magic elements that were worked in a lot of different settings into what is really a pretty complex sword and sandal movie. It was not executed well. It was, for me, it was poorly acted and poorly directed, and the screenplay was sometimes ridiculous. Um, I feel like a good director and definitely much better photography could have made this a much cooler movie. Overhaul the script, but a lot of the elements that were there are really cool. A lot of the characters were conceptually really cool. None of it was just executed well. Um, but the story itself is a lot of fun. It's got the bare bones to be a really good movie. Um, I'm assuming that some of the like the technology stuff, like some of the mystical stuff, that they just couldn't do the effects for at the time, are part of the reason why the lighting and the colorization of the movie is so weird all the way through. It's kind of lit like a cheap soap opera from the 70s and 80s. Um, it's kind of bizarre some of the choices that were made that really just kind of wrecked the fun of what this movie probably should have been. So, I mean, sword and sandal movies aren't as popular now as they were in the 80s, which I guess that's good. There's not as many of them, popping out. No one wants to see another John Carter. But I do think that this is a movie that could really benefit from a redo. So tell me what you guys think. Are any of these five movies something you would like to see redone? What movies did I absolutely leave off the list? Which of these five are so quality that they shouldn't be redone? Um, I will say this: none of them have big audiences now, right? I don't feel like any of these movies really survive. Maybe Natural Born Killers still has an audience that really likes it, but as far as the other four, I don't think any of them really survived the test of time. But if they did, uh, I can understand the argument for kind of leaving them alone. But I feel like that these all five could benefit from a reboot. Tell me what you think. All right, guys. I suppose I should get back to what I'm really supposed to be doing and get on For All Mankind. Talk to you later.